I never saw the world outside of the box. All I knew were the 6 sectors that connected to the main hall, and I'd only ever really been in a few of them. A buzzer went off. "Addison. We have to go," my brother Gabriel called. "Coming," I replied. There was a time when I didn't care about the box. I didn't understand why we were trapped here, what was so remarkable about this place. Until I learned about the fire. It took me a while to understand just how much power we Fireraisers had. I'd never been able to summon fire, but I came close quite a few times. Growing up here, my whole life came with learning how to fit in, how to be like them, how to satisfy the Arsonist. All I knew from the outside world were from the old DVDs in our sector. The world used to be full of joy, happiness, art, music, people, all that stuff. That was until the monsters emerged from the shadows. No one knew where they came from. No one expected them. I followed Gabe, my dad, and my mom through the hallway, towards the metal door. We waited until the 3rd buzz, then the door opened automatically and we walked through. All 6 sectors connected together, the hall being in the center of it all. "Do you think we'll be able to summon fire today?" Gabe asked me when I walked out of my room. "Probably not. We never do," is what I wanted to say. But that type of attitude was precisely the kind that stopped you from summoning fire. "Maybe," I said instead. "I hope so." The main hall was filled with seats, all facing the same direction, where Parker would teach. My dad was the highest in the box. Being the parent, or leader of Sector 1, he was one of the most powerful Fireraisers. The main hall was already mostly filled with the members of the other sectors by the time I sat down. The same chair I sat in every week. "Hello everyone. Aren't you all glad to be here today?" Parker said. All eyes were on him. He said the same thing every single week. I looked around the room to figure out where everyone was sitting. Gabe was sitting in front of me, this guy I knew named Matthew sat in the back left corner, I sat on the right side, and David sat in his own chair in the front. David was the parent of Sector 2, so he was like the second most powerful Fireraiser. Matthew lived in Sector 3. I looked around at the 7 doors that surrounded the hall. All but one was opened. The 7th door. It was in the very back of the main hall, but it didn't lead to any sectors. Instead, it led to the outside world. "The time is coming soon," Parker said, loudly so everyone could hear. "We only have a short time left until the Arsonist comes. He's been working on the 2nd box for about 20 years now, and it's almost finished." Parker took a sip of water from the bottle on the ground and then continued. "When he created the box, he didn't intend to leave us here. He built it to protect us from the monsters. I heard the story a million times. The Arsonist created the box to keep people safe from the monster apocalypse, but because it was small, he left to build a bigger version. But he didn't leave us here weak. This is why we're the Fireraisers. He gave us the ability to summon his fire, we just have to know how to use it." "You know," David stood up from his chair, and stood next to Parker, who stepped off to the side a bit. "If you think he's not coming back, you're wrong. The letters make it pretty clear," David continued. "The 2nd box is finished. It's only a matter of days." The letters were only sent to the best of Fireraisers. They were sent from the Arsonist himself, usually to sector parents. I always wished to one day receive a letter, but they were only ever sent to a few people. Something happened at the front of the hall. Something really unusual. At first, I wondered if I was seeing things. David's eyes. Everyone in the room seemed to notice them. Little flames, raising out of David's eyes. Fire. The flames grew until they were like torches. It was beautiful, but scary at the same time. Actual fire. David continued to speak as if nothing was happening. "The Arsonist's powers only work through you if you let them." His voice was different now, like he wasn't the same person. It sounded like what I imagined a snake would sound like if they could talk. David held his hands out, and they caught fire in an instant. "Accept the Arsonist, and this is what you can do." David closed his hands, and the fire was gone. His hands started to glow orange. The fire was still there, building up inside his hands. Then, he released it. That was the last thing I remember before the world exploded around me. I was on the ground of the main hall when my eyes opened. Flames blazed almost to the roof. The fire burned everything. Pain surged through my arm, and I looked down to see a large burn. It looked like a third-degree burn. The flesh was burnt off, leaving a discolored circle. I ignored the pain and forced myself onto my feet. The fire was scorching my skin in all directions. Most of the chairs were still standing because they were connected to the floor. I couldn't see anything very well in all the fire, but noticed someone sitting in a chair to my left. It was a woman, Martha. I forgot what sector she was from. I ran over to her, tripping on something that was on fire. "Martha," I shouted through the sound of fire burning all I ever knew. "We have to go now." Why was she just sitting there? She didn't even look at me. When I made it to her, I shook her. "Come on. We need to go." She was looking forward. Her eyes were blank, besides the reflection on fire. "Martha. Why isn't she listening to me?" "The fire," she said it loud enough, but she was mumbling like she was half asleep. "The fire's beautiful. It's going to kill us all if you don't come on now." I screamed. She can't seriously want to stay here and burn. Then I noticed another person in the fire. Gabe. I had to get him out. There were seats in my way. I had to go around. I moved as quickly as I could, sliding through chairs with people still standing in them. No one was moving. "Gabe. Gabriel." I was screaming. "We need to go." I tripped over something and tumbled over. It was easier to breathe down here, but I stood back up. Where did I see him at? I looked around, but all I could see was smoke and fire. I ran wildly forward, not sure where I was heading. Then I saw him again. "Gabe." I screamed. I was too late. The fire climbed up him, as if it were alive, covering him in flames like he were a bush flaring up. He sat still, letting the flame consume him. No. I ran forward as fast as I could, which wasn't very fast with all the burning rubble scattered around. I was so distraught that at first, I didn't notice the roof coming down. I jumped to the right, rolling just out of the way, just in time to avoid the giant metal beam about as big around as a tree that came crashing down. The box was filled with even more flames and fire as the roof started to give up. "I have to get out of here." Tears formed in my eyes. As I glanced around, it was like the whole world was on fire. To me it was. I closed my eyes, my tears fell onto the ground. I tried to stop them, I tried to open my eyes again, but I stayed there. One by one my tears fell. The roof made a groaning sound. I opened my eyes and stared at the beam in the middle of the box. My eyes followed it down, all the way to the left, where the 7th door was. The 7th door. The fire seemed to glow off the number 7, which still somehow hung onto the top of the doorway, despite the metal beam that had crashed from the roof, forcing the two metal doors apart. A small space, just big enough for a small adult. Or a small 17-year-old. I was on my feet and moving before I realized where I was going. Outside. Every step felt easier as I stumbled through the blazes, toward the door. When I touched it, I immediately pulled my hand back as the metal scorched my fingers. "It's too hot," I realized. I turned around, glancing around the room. My eyes locked onto something in flames. Smoke rose out of every piece of broken wood, every flame, but somehow my eyes locked onto something behind the smoke. David. His eyes burned with fire staring into my soul, his skin burned off, leaving nothing but a flaming skeleton behind. "You'll never survive out there." I didn't know where the voice came from, or who it was, but I knew that regardless of who was speaking, I wasn't going to stay there. I didn't care what was outside. I realized now, the real monster was the box itself. I clenched my fist, mustered up all the strength I had, and pressed up against the metal doors, squeezing between them. Maybe in some alternate universe, I died there as the roof collapsed with nothing but my hand sticking out of the box, freedom just beyond those doors. But that wasn't this universe. My body slid through the doors, and I landed in the cold dirt on the other side. I crawled a few feet, still panicked until my body gave out, and I was laying in the cold dirt, surrounded by air fresher than any air I'd ever breathed. I coughed smoke, My eyes teared up, the burns all starting to make themselves known all at once it seemed. I slowly stood up, turning around to look at the box from the outside for the first time. The fire blazed twice as high as the box itself. All that was left of the world I knew was a pile of rubble, a bonfire of demons. Hours passed as I watched the fire slowly shrink, the blood and tears drying onto my face. I closed my eyes, and took a deep breath, before opening them again, and for the very first time in my life, I looked around the outside world. I was surrounded by trees. It was hard to see in the darkness of midnight, but I noticed a trail, barely visible. It looked like a hiking trail. I turned around, to look at the box again. I stared into the flames. You burned me with your fire. So I'll leave you behind. Where you told me I would perish. But I'm the one who's standing here, living my own life. Yet here you are, burned to ashes. By the same flame that you burned me with. I turned around, towards the trail that led into the woods. Let's see where you lead me. My heart beat faster with every step as I trailed through the forest. I can't believe I'm doing this. I thought to myself. Fear shot through my veins at every noise, expecting something to jump out at me any second now. I forced myself to keep walking, ignoring what my head told me. You'll never survive out there. The words spoke again. This time they sounded different. Like they were less real, as if I imagined them. I picked up the pace, breaking into a jog, then into a run. I didn't know why I was running, but it felt easier than walking. Whatever's out there, just kill me already. The cool nighttime air felt nice against the burns on my arms, which calmed my fears. Now, with each step into the unknown, I felt more convinced there wasn't actually anything out there. I slowed back into a walk, focusing on my breathing. Just when my heart had gone back to beating like normal, fear shot through me once more, sending a jolt through my heart and blood. There was something in the path. It looked like a person. The darkness made it hard to see, but it was looking right toward me. It had short hair, its eyes were crossed out, like two X's over its face, the rest of its body seemed to static like film grain, like it was only partially there. If it weren't for the eyes, I likely would have never even noticed it standing there. I stopped moving, my heart pounding. Turn back now. The voice in my head said. You don't want to meet what's waiting at the end of this path. It looked like it was warning me. I took a step back, thinking about returning to the box, or what was left of it, living the rest of my life with the burning skeletons of those I called family. Don't be stupid, that would suck. I realized. I would rather die facing whatever's at the end of this path than live the rest of my life waiting for the arsonist to show up. I charged toward the monster in front of me before my fears could stop me. It took me a few seconds to realize the creature wasn't getting any closer. No matter how fast I ran, it still stayed about 5 yards ahead of me, slowly seeming to fade away, getting more and more blurry and hard to see, until I couldn't see it anymore. I slowed my pace until I was walking again. The monster was gone. I stopped and turned around, gazing towards where the box was. I was looking for smoke, but if there was some, I couldn't see it through the darkness. I turned back around, my eyes locking onto something on the path. A person. Or at least, it looked like a person, it was too far away to really see very well. Is this what the monster was warning me about? I continued forward slowly, fearing it was going to charge me any second now. It was a boy. He looked about my age, with dark skin and short hair, sure didn't look like the evil scary monster I was expecting. As I got closer, he noticed me. He was smiling, for the first time in a long time. I smiled too. Hey, he said. His voice sounded normal, like it was the most realistic sound I'd ever heard. Hi, I replied, not knowing what to say. My name's Damien. I can't believe I'm in the outside world, talking to someone. I felt a huge sense of uneasiness, like any second now he'd shift into some demonic creature and eat me or something. But the way his eyes moved around, so full of emotions and thoughts, his face looked alive. He held out his hand for me to shake it. I almost took a step back, hesitating. Am I really going to do this? The memory of Gabe burning alive, David's fleshless skeleton standing as if it were plotting my death, the box being burned to the ground. "My name's Addison." I shook his hand. I expected to meet my doom at the end of that trail. That at any second my hope that it'll all be okay would be replaced with terror, like the people in the box always said. What I didn't expect was to make a friend, my first friend in 17 years of being alive. My first real friend. Fear is a powerful weapon. Everything I was taught about the outside world was wrong. I was always told the outside world was filled with monsters and demons, who don't care about your happiness. That night, with Damien, I realized, the world wasn't scary. The box was. I managed to get a job, a place to stay, started making more friends, one of which bloomed into something more, and somehow managed to live life. I wish I could say we all lived happily ever after, but that's not completely true. While I felt love for the first time in my life when I escaped the box, it still haunted me. I could still see that creature from time to time when the sun goes down. Crossed-out eyes, fuzzy, almost fake-looking body, teeth too sharp for a human. It's like it's always waiting. Waiting for me to travel back to the box because now, it can't hurt me. But I ignore the eyes, I ignore the creature that follows me like a shadow. Because I won't burn.